11 minutes to the top of the hour, 8 a.m. We continue here with Morning at NTV. Now, it's time for our Kickstarter. My name is Priscilla Regina Narwoga, and we're looking at the reactions to the President's State of the Nation address. Hashtag Morning at NTV on all our social media platforms. We want to hear your reactions. We've read some of them. We've shared some from our leaders, both in the faith and politics. Now, you, who is going to be on the other end, on the receiving end, what is your response and reaction to the State of the Nation address? So do share that on that hashtag Morning at NTV. But you can continue streaming to your next destination on YouTube as well as Facebook. Just type in NTV Uganda and you'll be live with us. Here in studio, joining me for this conversation is Ambassador Henry Mayega, who is a Consul General, the Uganda Consulate Dubai, and he's going to help us, give us a breakdown from his perspective on some of the things that actually appeared in the President's speech. Good morning to you, Ambassador.
Good morning to you, and once again, of course, good morning to our listeners and viewers. It's an opportunity to be again here at NTV, talking about the statement which was made by the President yesterday, touching so many things: infrastructure, middle-income status, which I understand people are so much interested in, peace in the country, international relations. It's quite really widespread. Quite a number of things that were mentioned by the President, which are really
but
good for the
before we
ear.
go into the President's speech, you have been in the country and in the diaspora for the last 12 months. What are some of the things that have affected you directly vis-a-vis the economic crisis?
Well, the economic crisis is a really very interesting subject because it is terribly, I think, presumptuous for us as nationals of this country to assume that these things are only affecting Uganda. It's just across the globe. Just recently, those who are interested must have seen what's happening in the Western world in terms of commodity prices going up. In the US, the shelves are empty. If you want to buy groceries and all these kinds of things, and recently we're talking about baby formula and so on and so forth. So this is something that is affecting the entire globe as a result of, probably, as the experts, international experts have said, as a result of the Ukraine war, but initially as a result of the pandemic, which really affected quite a number of things. So really, these are matters that should preoccupy our minds and have really very serious debate on how to tackle them. Unfortunately, the President talked about so many of these things, and in my view, I think that was justice done in as far as the subjects are concerned.
Okay, all right. And as far as that is concerned, from the address that he shared, of course, he did point out a few things. You've talked about the international relations that we should be having as a country and building in terms of the diaspora, given the fact that COVID-19 actually brought to light and the fact that we are a global community and we need each other to survive. However, does not actually mean that we must give away all the time. We must make sure that we have something for ourselves, keep something for ourselves, invest something for ourselves to be able to better tap into the bigger opportunities that are present. For example, in regards to coffee, when he did mention that globally $460 billion go to the coffee industry. And then when you look at Africa per se, Africa alone gets to only have 2.4 of that billion US dollars as a share for them, and that's coffee growing. And so he made a statement in saying, if we get to focus on actually grinding, roasting for ourselves, and also making sure that we package it well, then maybe we can be able to tap into more of that money that is available in terms of global market. Anyway, joining us for this conversation still is Nakawa MP, that is for Nakawa West, Joel Ssenyonyi. They boycotted this State of the Nation address yesterday, and he will be here to defend that boycott, but more so react, representing the people of Nakawa, but also the general Ugandan in terms of what is the way forward in the next 12 months. Good morning to you, Joel.
Good morning. How are you, Priscilla?
Very good.
I want to apologize for coming late. One of my household members got unwell in the night, so it disorganized me, but I'm glad I'm here.
Thank you so much for making the time.
Good to see Ambassador Mayega here.
Thank you very much.
Ambassador is, culturally speaking, my relative. So it's good to see. I used to be on your end hosting this
Once upon
gentleman.
a time.
So many times I hosted him.
Yeah.
So now we are here together
Okay.
to sort things out. But I'm glad to be here.
All right. So the ambassador has given us his preamble, of course, expectations out of the speech. We want to hear from you. Of course, you are in the National Unity Platform, and the opposition yesterday decided to sit out this particular State of the Nation address. What were those particular reasons?
Some are political, some are technical. I'll begin with the technical. Conveniently speaking, I get very disturbed each time we have to go to Kololo. It is extremely inconveniencing. You know, one, they tell you, leave your phone at Parliament. Then we enter those shuttles like school-going children.
But it's what you signed up for, Joel.
Is it what I signed up for? Like, I can choose to stay away from it.
It's the procedure of Parliament in order to have and conduct the things that they conducted, such as the State
under
of the
what
Nation
rule in our rules of
address.
procedure? Now that I talk about procedure.
I'm not the clerk of Parliament, am I?
So there's no such procedure. I'm the one in Parliament, so let me tell you.
Okay.
You know, and you see the problem with that, so we get to Kololo, and we don't have phones, no access, no whatever, and then you have to wait, by the way, till evening when the buses leave, you know. But what bothers me is the invited guests usually have their phones. So in one of those times, I bumped into Emmanuel Dombo, spokesperson of his party, and he had his phone. I said, you man, you have your phone here. This is Parliament, you know, because it's been declared as such. It is my house. I have been ransacked. I don't have my phone, very inconvenient, but you, a guest, you do. So now those are the technical issues, which are quite inconveniencing. And yet it's not like I'm going for a debate. You know, I can watch Mr. Museveni if I want to, from wherever I am, or even on social media. So one of the reasons, for me, even before we sat and agreed, you know, as the opposition, not to go, I was nonetheless not going, just for convenience. Because why should I go through all that hassle and bustle, COVID tests, and then we spend I don't know how much money to go and sit there and listen, and then afterwards go away. You know, it doesn't make sense. But the political reason is, we feel that little, if anything, has been done about the current state of affairs. You know, Mr. Museveni, each time he speaks, we expect, okay, we're going to hear some kind of remedy. Nothing. Keep saying you are on your own, go and eat cassava and that kind of thing, you know. So we felt it's not relevant to listen to such talk to give him audience. And so we steered clear of it.
Okay. Nevertheless, you did receive a copy of the speech. You have
Incidentally,
seen,
I have
and you have watched.
not read it.
So
I watched your news, and so I picked bits and pieces, you know. But again, you know, I was in the media for over 14 years. And each State of the Nation address, you could get one of 5 years ago and just change the date, and things remain the same. So here we are.
Okay, all right. I'll go back to Ambassador Henry Mayega. In regards to what the president delivered to the state when it comes to the things that he talked about, what do you make of the things that he talked about?
As I said before, and thank you very much for, again, this opportunity, he touched quite a number of things. I mean, he talked about the middle income status, which I think some in this country are also contesting. But the fact of the matter is that there are three segments, and as far as that is concerned, namely the low and the middle and then the high. You know, and for us, we are the boundary entering the lower, whatever segment of that income status.
Which is
I have read the speech.
Because we have 1,036
I have read his speech.
He said we are now lower middle income status. You guys ran the news yesterday.
I wish Honorable would listen to me, because I listened to him very attentively, so that we would not really come here to engage in an exchange which is not really very healthy. But when it comes to the middle status, because I think he was very clear, and he said that, look, where we are at the moment at 10.46 US dollars, and the entry point is 10.36. We are at the boundary level of the lower segment, you know, and I think it was very clear. And he even added something else, and he said that, look, we have to wait for another 2 or 3 years in order to confirm ourselves, depending, of course, on so many things. There are dynamics which are internal in the country. There are also dynamics which are international. And many of these countries all over the world are now suffering from these, you know, dynamics, especially when it comes to the Ukraine war, as I said before, and also the pandemic, which rears its ugly head every now and then. And therefore, these things affect the way we perform and how we move into the middle income status. But there we are. He made a statement. It was very, in my view, it was very important, because when you look at the rest of the countries in the East African community, like Kenya and Tanzania, they have already hit the 36, you know, middle income status, and therefore the club in the East African community is growing, and the club is expanding in terms of economic capacity. When you look, for instance, at the DRC, which is now basically getting pacified, especially on the Eastern Front, that opens up markets for this country, and therefore also when you add the pacification of, for instance, Southern Sudan, that also expands the market for our products. And so the East African region is giving an opportunity for us to expand these markets, and therefore I believe that in the next coming years that will be very important as far as exportation of our products are concerned. This country, in my view, I've been to quite a number of countries, but this country has the potential to be a food basket in this region, and therefore for us in the diplomatic world, we are really pushing so hard, and especially in the UAE, where I've been for now 1.5 years, we are pushing so hard to make sure that we promote as much as possible the agricultural sector in this country in terms of processing, so that we can sell these things. So one of the things he mentioned was to do with the entry into the middle income status, and he says that we are at the boundary. That means at the lower segment of the middle income status, which in my view is a very big progress. Now when we talk about the rest of the things, apart from aside the middle income status, you can, I mean, it touched on the construction of infrastructure in terms of roads, ports, and so on and so forth. And to me, that's extremely important, because without this infrastructure, it becomes extremely difficult for this country to be productive.
All right, thank you so much, Ambassador. Turning to you as a member of Parliament, Joel, you definitely have to help your people in Nakawa West to interpret what is this middle income status that the president is talking about. 1,036 being the bar. We're at 1,046. Of course, it's on the lower end, but one will ask you, how did the government aid in us getting to here? And then what are actually the embedments? What are the policies? What are the solutions that can actually sustain us in the next 2-3 years to be able to ascertain ourselves as a middle income class kind of country?
This middle income status talk is a joke, Priscilla. It's a big lie. And I'll tell you why. I'll not even get into figures, because I don't want us to confuse our viewers there. In January of this year, Jan 26th, Mr. Museveni and team were celebrating Starehe Sita and that kind of thing. They were at Kololo. And he announced and said that, I'm sorry I'm laughing because it's so funny. You know, he said that we are going to achieve middle income status by 2026. Because, you know, previously he had promised us 2020, you know, by 2020. It came and passed. The excuse was COVID. But I said, no, you said by 2020. So that meant by December 31st, 2019. COVID came much later. So it was a hoax. And so at the start of this year, about 5 months ago, said 2026 we are going to achieve middle income status. 5 months later, you are announcing that we are now middle income.
We have entered from the lower end, and that's what the
I want to understand how, because
there's
you see
levels to this middle income status. So
I know that for a fact. There's lower and upper middle income status. You know, get the economics out of it. Just have perspective. Yeah, that 5 months ago you're saying. In about 5 years, we're going to achieve middle income status. But you're telling us we have now achieved it in 5 months. These 5 months have been one of the worst.
Joel,
just look at our economy.
We have entered it, not achieved it. Those are two different things.
No, they are the same.
No,
it's just English. Okay. You see, when you say we have we have entered lower middle income status, it's the same as saying we have achieved lower middle income status. That's just Luzungu. Don't try to confuse people here. So when you first tell us we are going to achieve it in 5 years' time, and then 5 months later you're saying we have actually achieved it, we have entered, okay, let me use your word to make you happy. But you see, these 5 months have been one of the worst. Our economy has been hit the hardest. People have lost jobs. People cannot afford food, you know. Fuel prices are through the roof. Commodity prices are through the roof. Our economy for the last 1 year has been plunging. You know, but so 5 months, you tell us in 5 years we are going to achieve it. But now you're saying, I want to know the magic that has happened in these 5 months that has caused us to achieve middle income status. But you see, most importantly, and that's why many times I don't like to use these middle income status things because they confuse people. We need to measure wealth by one, the poverty levels. We need to measure wealth by people's ability to access healthcare. What is our healthcare system like? We need to measure wealth by the efficaciousness of our education for our young people. We need to measure wealth by people's purchasing power parity. Okay, now again I'm getting confusing. By, you know, what is my ability as an ordinary citizen to acquire commodities? And you know, people have been crying all the while, you know. So these figures that politicians throw around really are just to confuse people.
And you as a person
people are
who's
poor
on ground in regards to what you're telling us, in how you measure it by the wealth is measured by how easily they can acquire, you know, the things, the basic needs, education, food, health that you have talked about. And so intangible means you've had visitation of your people back and forth. What is the reality on the ground of people's acquiring of wealth in those three forms?
The reality on ground is alarming. Every weekend I move around in my constituency. I go especially to the ghettos, and I see what is there. I see the lives ordinary people live. It is appalling, you know. So these things don't make sense to them, that we are now middle income status. Maybe if, I don't know what parameter Mr. Museveni used. He probably got a small group of people around him, and then he did a quick measurement, because middle income status, GDP per capita, so you get 3 of us, and then you say you earn 1 million, I earn 2, he earns 3. When we do an average, each of us earns 2. But these things don't make sense to the ordinary people. What is going to make sense to them is not telling them that we are now middle income status, and I see it flashed here on New Vision, obviously, that now Uganda attains middle income status. The ordinary person, where I come from, in Mulimira, one of the places my constituency, in Naguru, go down, in Acholi Quarters, Banda, they want that when they go to hospital, they will be attended to. Many times I find them on the floor of these hospitals, because there's no beds, there's nobody to attend to them, there's no medicine. The mothers are being told, no, first go and buy, I don't know, Kavera and that kind of thing. When these services are available to them, these things will make sense to them. You know, when they take their children to school, here in Kampala, forget about the villages. Here in Kampala, you go to some of the UPE schools, the structures are about to crumble on these young people because they are in a tenement state. You find one teacher is teaching, I don't know how many subjects, and that teacher will teach for about 30 minutes and then run to the trading center to ride the border. You know why? Because one, he earns a small salary, it's a niggardly salary. Number two, it comes late. So he has to kuyiya because that teacher has a family. That's why he'll first abandon the students a little bit, run, ride the border, make some money, because he has a family to take care of. And here you are telling people about middle income status. Fix that, then it will make sense. You know, many of our young people are unemployed. Our inflation levels are through the roof. The purchasing power parity has gone down. So these things, they only excite, you know, I don't know who. But you cannot talk of middle income status in the state in which we are. It's a lie.
All right, let's talk to you, Ambassador. When you talk about, in terms of one of the things that the President has continuously echoed, 2021 and to 2022, commercialization of agriculture. And from where you sit, in terms of international relations, of course, he brought out the picture so eminently in terms of coffee, particularly, when he talked about what amounts of money are available in the coffee industry right now. And he talked about the $460 billions, and then he talked about how little of that Africa as a country, for coffee growing countries, gets to eat of that cake, which is a 2.4 billion. But then he talked about translating that into more money if we could only create environments that are good for investors to come in, good for investors to bring closer to us things that we need, such as roasting, processing plants. And so in your capacity, what is your response to that?
Fantastic. For me, that was a very timely comment, because Ugandans are aware that our country participated in the Expo, Dubai Expo, which began last year in October and ended this year in March. And it was a period of 6 full months in which Uganda had a pavilion, and we displayed the kinds of things that we have and the products, and we had bilateral meetings with investors and also government officials of the UAE government. And at the end of the day, we attracted more than 2.5 billion US dollars
and
in terms of investment.
And
I want to talk about tea specifically, but quite a number of sectors are going to be to benefit from these investments. But I just want to bring out two. Just one example of what happened during the expo, and that is 7 factories, tea factories are going to be established in this country by Emirati investors, and that brings almost $1 billion US in terms of investment. So when Honorable Joel Ssenyonyi talks about the how we have made this is part of the game, and this is just one of the missions of Uganda that really does the economic and commercial diplomacy in order that this country can benefit from investments, from FDIs and so on and so forth. And that's how we come into the middle income states, one of the ways how we come into that, because the president even outlined quite a number of things that have contributed to our entry into the lower middle income status, including peace, Pan-Africanism, expanding. Of course, Pan-Africanism talks about the expansion of the market in the region. Like the other time, you remember, when we intervened in Sudan, Southern Sudan, some, especially the opposition, they were not agreeable to that, but the president went ahead and actually deployed the army, the UPDF, and peace, in a sense, returned, and the government in Southern Sudan has been operational, as it were. And all of these are part of the process of making sure that we expand our markets and therefore sell our products as much as possible, and then earn these incomes. And these incomes are extremely important because they're the ones that are going to take us to the middle income status. And so our entry into that lower segment of the middle income status is real. It is real because it has also happened in Kenya, it has happened in Tanzania, and it's definitely going to happen in the rest of these African countries for as long as they have the right economic policies. Of course, the president was talking about subsidies and also lowering taxes, but his argument is, and I agree with him, that look, when you subsidize, it means taking away some of these resources from the construction, for instance, of roads. It means that when you take away this money, then people will complain about lack of roads, so that you finance consumptive areas like bread and so on and so forth, and sugar and so on, because that is consumptive. You drink the sugar and that's the end of the day. But the road will be there for as many years as possible, for as long as the government invests. So I agreed with the president that, look, these subsidies, we have to be very careful. And also reducing taxes is an extremely difficult thing. But coming back to the coffee, there was a suggestion quite a couple of years by the government. It was a proposal, I don't know how far it has gone, that we need, and these are international global policies, and as far as marketing is concerned, that we need to register coffee growers. We need to make sure that we start processing our own coffee. But the game of breaking the cartels that have really captured the coffee industry in terms of marketing, in terms of selling it, are really very strong. And therefore, how do you do these things? How you do these things is by ensuring that the necessary processes are actually conducted in order to expand the coffee industry. Interestingly, I think Ugandans should be informed about one other thing, that actually the biggest producer of coffee on the African continent is Ethiopia. But the biggest exporter of coffee on the African continent is actually Uganda. And I hope that nationals actually know about this. If they didn't, then they should know. So this is a very important industry, the coffee industry. So when the president talks about it passionately, I think it means good for this country, and also for the coffee farmers, and also for the economy, and also even our entry into the middle income status. Extremely important. So the coffee industry needs to be streamlined. We need to process our own coffee. We need to make sure that the coffee, because you see, according to the international policies, when it comes to marketing coffee, the coffee must not use, for instance, child labor. The coffee farmer must be registered. This is worldwide. It's not something that the Museveni administration is actually concocting. They must make sure that the coffee hauliers do not take in stones, for instance, the impurities. So the coffee industry is extremely, just like the rest of the industries when it comes to marketing, are extremely sensitive, and therefore we have to do, I saw a lot of opposition when that proposal was being made, how we can gain from the coffee industry. Yeah. Extremely important for us to ensure that the coffee industry is streamlined in such a way that we can capture the larger market.
One of the platforms of streamlining, of course, that we had initially subscribed to was the International Coffee Organization, for which we no longer subscribe to. Doesn't that put us in a dire, terrible state of when it comes to transactions of coffee globally?
For me, that's what you remember I talked about the cartels, how they engulf the entire marketing process, and therefore they determine even the price for you, even if the president was very passionate yesterday. So are you saying
that there's cartels in the ICO?
Absolutely, and that's why we haven't been benefiting the rest of us who are in the industry of coffee, because the president was very clear, because he said that the coffee, by the way, coffee, the other point which I needed to point out is that coffee is the most traded commodity in the world, more than even the oil, which people talk about. So when the president yesterday talked about 460, the coffee industry globally is worth $460 billion US. That's hugest amount of money. And yet we, as exporters, especially from the third world, including Uganda, of course, are only benefiting in the region of $2.4 billion US. And that injustice has to be corrected.
So, of course, if you're saying that, you know, unsubscribing to the ICO is one of the corrections, then what are the recorrections of us being able to then tap into the market but not going through the cartels?
Precisely, that's what the British did after the Brexit, because they said, look, we have left the EU and therefore we must look for our own markets on our own, because if the other cartel is unfair and is controlling the prices and keeping them at the bare minimum all the time, the price doesn't increase, and yet they're benefiting these Barney cafes, these Starbucks and all these kinds of things. These are international things that actually have kept a stranglehold on the coffee industry. And therefore, to break out of that stranglehold, we need to get out of those cartels and make sure that we just look for our own markets.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. Back to you, Joel Ssenyonyi. What are the strongholds that are on coffee right now when it comes to Uganda locally?
Ambassador has painted a good image of what potential we have in the coffee industry, and he has also diagnosed the problem rightly, in my view, including cartels and so on. Challenge is the remedy. Part of the remedies they are suggesting is another cartel called Pineti. Of course, as of yesterday, we got to know who the real Pineti is, because Mr. Museveni told the country that, look, this woman here, she had no idea about coffee. For her, she was into hospitals, which hospitals she has also not delivered. Remember the Lubowa hospital saga? Last year we gave her 348 billion shillings. And this year she wants more, 319 billion. When you go to Lubowa, there's nothing there. Pineti is a thief.
There's only cranes there. Don't say there's nothing. There's cranes that...
Well, we didn't pay her to put up cranes. We paid her to put up a hospital. So there's no hospital. And that's why I'm saying Pineti is a thug. In plain language, because that's what you are. If 348 billion shillings, just think about that. To deliver. And now there's nothing happening, and this year you're asking for more. That's why I'm saying with a lot of confidence that Pineti is a thief. Now, going to the coffee element. So Mr. Museveni tells us, well, she had no idea about coffee. I am the one who insisted. So now, as far as coffee is concerned, we know who the Pineti is. Because you see, again, getting back to basic economics, forces of demand and supply. If you are saying, yes, there's so much potential, it is untapped and that kind of thing, we export raw materials, you know, of coffee beans, they process them, and then what are we buying? Chocolate. You know, when you go to many supermarket stores, you find on their shelves, it is imported coffee. So we should be able to produce our own. But you see, the modus operandi, you're saying that now we have this one individual here, we are going to remove all manner of taxes. In that agreement, actually, they included, aside from all manner of taxes that can be waived, in future, if there be any tax that is not waivable, government will pay. Not even waive, will pay for her. Why? Which kind of investor is this, surely? Because if you're saying you want to help us as far as coffee is concerned, you come and set up a company, coffee processing, of their own volition. These coffee farmers will bring to you as long as you're giving them a good price. Why are you forcing them to bring to Pineti? Because that's what it is. Because the agreement is saying we guarantee she will have all the high quality coffee and that kind of thing. So in essence, what that means, you know, soldiers will go to people's gardens with guns. You bring your bags of coffee to this woman. If she is a serious investor, be like any other, you know, come and set up a factory. You will not have to force Ugandans to bring their coffee to you. Just give them a good price. They will look for you. They will not go elsewhere. Forces of demand and supply, very simple. So for us to imagine that we are going to fix this by bringing a Pineti here, we give her land, we are guaranteeing her all these crazy things.
So the president defends
sense.
himself and saying, of course, it was just the fact that she had contacts to people who can actually come and invest in coffee here in Uganda. Now, away from that and his defense in that regard,
let the contacts come and build the factory people will bring.
Uganda directly, how do we then get to have the privileges that would have been awarded to Pineti in that contract be awarded to the local grower, be awarded to those that are actually in the chain of coffee commerce here in Uganda?
I've always made the case.
Because he made a statement and he said, now for those of you that want to invest, who want to improve on our raw materials, come, let's talk.
I've always made the case for what I'll call local investors. We seem to be very obsessed with foreign investors. They come here, we give them land. We give them tax holidays. Of late, we are guaranteeing them money. By the way, in Luganda, an investor is a Musiga Nsimbi. Now, if we are the ones giving you money, we're the ones kusigaring in you. So you cease to be an investor. We are the ones investing in you, you know. And as we focus on those foreign fellows, there's our local people here who are struggling a great deal that I think we need to invest in. Enterprise Uganda will tell you that over 60% of Ugandan businesses that start don't live up to their first birthday. You know why? They crumble. High cost of production, heavy taxes, you know, which literally crumble them down. China is number 2 economically, globally. And the reason China has become number 2 and just might become number 1, if they continue at the pace they are on, it's because China has decided, let's focus on our small people here in China, as small manufacturers. You'll find many small factories in people's garages. This one is making this one is making slippers, nigi, you know, the things that we import here coming from China. So China has waived taxes for their quote-unquote small people. For us here, we're excited about the big people, the foreign investors. They've said, no, 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 this is where the real economy is, because these are the citizens of the country. The money will keep rotating within the economy. And that's why China is growing huge. And that's why almost everybody is importing from China. Because the cost of, and you know, when you go to the market, downtown or wherever, you'll find that Ugandan products are more expensive than Chinese products, which are coming from wherever. You know why? Because they have made it easy for them to produce the other side. So they will sell at a minimum price. Yeah. Now, our guys here who are struggling, the fellow has rent to pay, high electricity tariffs to pay, high taxes to pay. So for them to break even, their product will be slightly more expensive. Mm-hmm. So the Ugandan who has little money will go and buy the Chinese product.
An earring from China will cost about 200 shillings, and then by the time it gets here, it's 25,000 shillings. That's a big
the point is, let's empower our quote-unquote small people here. The tax waivers we are giving to these foreign investors who have turned out to be bayai. I was at UBC in 2006. I saw you guys and you and your colleague just recently left UBC. I don't know when you joined UBC. I was at UBC in 2006 when we were flashed out from Nakasero, and we were told there is an investor who is coming here to build the Chogam Hotel. And they chased us away. Chogam came and passed. And there was no hotel. Now eventually some fellow, put up something. Okay. Here, Shimoni.
Investor.
They were thrown out of that place. And they said, there's an investor here coming with the Chogam Hotel. It came and went, So that's the excitement we have over these foreign investors who turn out to be hoaxes and bayai.
The ambassador here is going to go and create relations internationally that should be harvesting investments. That should
I
be
don't
brought
have
back
the problem,
to the
Priscilla.
So how do we amalgamate and actually make this one and communion to be able to benefit Uganda?
I don't have a problem with foreign investors. Every country needs foreign investors. I'm only saying what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. Number one, when we are getting foreign investors, let's get legit people, not thugs. But yeah, people come here with briefcase companies and that kind of thing. So what we were investigating the Nakawa land.
A proper investor.
But I've just been adumbrating to you. You come, you're an investor, we give you land, we give you tax waivers, we give you money. You're not an investor, you're a briefcase fellow. We're investigating the Nakawa land. Some of the companies, big foreign companies that were given land are non-existent. So we just jump onto people all over the place. Let's do our due diligence properly. So that if we are talking about a foreign investor, it is a real foreign investor, not some guy who is coming to rip us off. But two, and most importantly, in my view, the same focus you are giving to these foreign investors, who you're saying have big money, put the same focus on your local producers, your local manufacturers. it's quixotic for you to feed your neighbor's children, and yet yours are starving. It just does not make sense at all. So Ugandan businesses are struggling. I saw Mr. Museveni castigating us as a country, saying we import literally everything. And he's right. Our balance of payments are that way. We import twice as much as we export. Do you see this road, Ginger Road, all the way to the border? Just take a good look at that road when you keep going all the way to the border. The right side sunk in. This other side on the left is actually smooth. You know why? Because trucks come in heavy, full with stuff, you know, from Kenya and wherever, imported. When they are going out, they are light. There's literally nothing there. So that goes to show you the challenge that we have. So he is right. We import a lot more than we export, but it's part of the problem. Because you're not empowering our local producers to be able to produce, you know, break even.
I'll bring in
that will how we'll do this whole boo-boo thing we're talking about.
Talk about the fact that, yes, we do have the local market, but one of the issues that we have with the local market is surplus. And so we have the opportunity to tap into the East African market. He talked about the African free trade zone. He talked about the EU. He talked about, you know, now you have been to the Arab Emirates and we've opened up great relations with, you know, the Emirates. So let's talk about how we can actually use these particular things to tap into those chains of commerce to be able to improve the economy in the long run.
Absolutely. We have bilateral relations. I worked in China for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020. Until when I was transferred to the UAE Abu Dhabi Uganda embassy, and we did quite a number of things. The president visited twice, and we signed a number of, as a country between China and Uganda, we signed a number of agreements and, to boost up trade, and right now quite a number of fruits, which I can name, packed pineapples, packed mangoes and so on, actually have found an entry into the Chinese market, had it not been for this pandemic and all these kinds of things which are affecting us. So that sector was handled that way, and I'm sure the colleagues who took over Uganda embassy in China are still pursuing those things. And as we speak, of course, you've seen quite a number of things coming up in Uganda, including the industries in Nakaseke that are making tiles and all these things. Those are a result of those bilaterals that we had between Uganda and China. Now, when it comes to the East African region and the AU, as the President spoke about it, this expansion of markets is extremely important. And I had expected that probably the opposition in this country shouldn't have actually opposed in the first place our entry with the UPDF into Southern Sudan and into the DRC, and the construction of roads into the DRC, as you remember. All these things were opposed. But those things are being done in the interest of this country so that we expand our market. DRC has just joined the East African community, and for me that is already a plus in as far as our marketing of whatever we produce, the surpluses we are talking about that need to be sold into these things. Now, going back to the UAE, what we've done, especially during the Expo, so many bilateral agreements have been signed, but one of the things that were achieved, probably, which I should have mentioned much earlier, is that there is a string of, for instance, supermarket called Ruru Supermarket, and just all over the place in the UAE. We have struck an agreement, and initially Uganda was supplying something like $2 million worth of agricultural products, where it has been stepped up to 10 million. So all of those are opportunities, and for us, as far as we are concerned, our job is to make sure that the economic and commercial diplomacy adds to what we have in terms of marketability of these surpluses that the President is talking about. And I believe that the rest of the embassies worldwide, Uganda embassies worldwide, are doing the same, because there has been quite a number of things which have been done, and that expansion is how we can survive in this country in terms of economics, in terms of this very animal that we're talking about, middle income status, entry. So there's quite a lot that is being done, and that is for purposes of ensuring that our economy grows, that the market for our products increases as much as possible, so that even the farmers in this country can feel much better. Had it not been for these interventions that have come, the pandemic and then the Ukraine war, which is disturbing the supply chains, which is, of course, that affects the way we do things. Okay,
back to Joel. Most recent days, we've seen something that was caught the attention of Ugandans. Because we're being told to eat cassava, but we are seeing expected salary increments on your side as members of parliament. How true is that?
I don't know. I'm seeing it in the media. I don't know about it.
So from the side of parliament, how is it intending to restructure in order to eat cassava with the rest of us?
I think there was, at the start of COVID-19, they said now we're going to cut down on literally every entity, every government arm. And Parliament got a cut. You know, MPs at the time were not happy. That actually began the 10th Parliament. You know, travels were cut down and all of that. Challenges as you're cutting down on some, others like State House, you know, it is shooting up. I don't know what they eat in that place, but there you are. So, you know, frugality should not only be one-sided. You don't tell people eat cassava, yet for you, you're increasing your budget for State House. It does not make sense at all. Let's all operate frugally, you know. Gone should be the times when Mr. Museveni has such a huge budget, whoever excites them. This one, oh, you have crossed over from opposition here. Have $1 billion and that kind of thing. That's how he's wasting our money, because it's our money. If it was money from, you know, him selling his cows wherever they are, that would be okay, you know. But it's taxpayers' money, so let frugality be across the board. Taxpayers'
money. These sleek cars that were purchased for ceremonial duty for the speakership, that's taxpayers' money.
Absolutely. So I've seen these things. In fact, after here, I'm going to Parliament after a couple of days. I want to also try and get a good understanding, you know, because I'm seeing these things in the media. They are, of course, very disturbing. Yesterday I was in my constituency and some people were asking me about these cards, you know, and I told them, honestly, I don't have much information. I'm going to gather good information because
it doesn't
I
make
also
sense,
want to
Joel,
know.
if the cards that were there before, they're ceremonial, meaning that they only appear once, twice, thrice a year, they are not in mechanical conditions, terrible mechanical conditions, they're still functioning. At such a time as this, while Ugandans are crying, give us something, do something for us here, break down for us.
I agree totally.
An incentive here and there, subsidy here and there, just cut on the tariff a little bit by a percentage. And we are having our own money, you know, going into the wind for a ceremonial car. Is that really fair to the Ugandans?
I agree that it's a huge challenge, you know, and that's why I said when you talk about frugality, when you say let's cut down, let's lower our expenses, it should cut across, you know. So people want to see that reflected in all the arms of government. They want to see that reflected in the executive, you know, in the legislature, in the judiciary. The challenge usually is some will suffer a lot more. Look at the judiciary. For example, I want the judiciary added money. They don't have judges. There's a huge case backlog. Why? Because you have one judge having to deal with so many judges. Of course, you know, there will be also a few who report late and that kind of thing. But generally, we don't have adequate judges in this country. Okay. That's why people, when they get a thief or whoever, they say, let's deal with this person ourselves here. Because the case will go on for 5 years. We will not get justice.
In conclusion, Joe.
You know, so in conclusion, I think as leaders, we must begin to make sense to the people that we lead. We must be brutally honest. You know, when you tell them middle income status, let it be reflected in their lives. You know, people are poor, they can barely afford a meal. You can't now be gloating. It is actually kubalata, that's what we call it in Uganda. We are now a rich. Uganda is a heavily indebted poor country. So let's tell people the truth. But number two, let's be concerned about these issues.
Okay.
Let's major on majors and minor on minors.
Okay. In your conclusion, how do Ugandans get to tap into these international opportunities that are present?
Absolutely. The government has put in place an environment in which I believe we can tap into. Of course, there are challenges at the moment. I mean, the skyrocketing prices, that is recognizable everywhere you go, including on the entire globe, and so on. But tapping into this so that everybody benefits requires that the government puts in place, and which it is already doing, because there is security, there is infrastructure is being developed in the country. So it will mean that people are going to tap into these opportunities and make sure that they benefit from whatever the government has put in place.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your submissions, and I trust that those have definitely shaped for you the reactions of the nation, the State of the Nation address. We do have some other people in their different capacities that we want to hear reactions of in regards to the State of the Nation. We do have Ivan Walonyolo in Entebbe, who's also going to give us on ground how people are reacting to the aftermath of the State of the Nation address. Good morning to you, Ivan. To you, how are people reacting to the State of the Nation?
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Priscilla. I am coming to you from the streets of Abaita Ababili here in Katabi Town Council, Wakiso District, this beautiful morning when people are out to go and find what to feed their families. And just like you can see, the street is very busy with the the vendors selling what they have and they can take home, what they can feed their children. But of course, we know very well that yesterday the president was speaking to the nation, and many things that were expected to be talked about, especially from the local people here. Abantu bawansi wanonga babadde n'ebintu bye basuubira nti omukulembeze w'eggwanga alina okubanga nabyo abyogerako. Naye njagala just kwogerako nabo omu babiri batubuulire kiki kye balowooza ku kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo. Kantandike n'ono omukulu atubuulire kiki ky'olowooza mu kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo.
Nze kyendowooza kye nalowooza ku kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo atuzze ate mu bintu by'emyaka egy'emabega ng'ate tuli ku kino eky'obudde buno embeera tunyiga kati tetunyiga mabega twavaayo dda sirabaki ye atwogerera ebyo ebyaluli ng'ate ebyaleero bye bitunyigiriza ate ku mulamwa gw'olwaleero tumanyi naffe twalonda omukulembeze naye ffe twalonda bwe twalonda teyayitamu.
Kiki ky'olowooza kye yandyogeddeko gwe ng'omuntu?
Nze kyendowooza kye yaliyogeddeko alaala emisolo gyo bagisse bagikakkanye baleke twekyanza natwekyaya ku bintu embeera engeri gye birinnyeemu. Gwe toyinza kuddira n'ogamba nti mafuta banagewanise buli wamu buli muntu kati tulina tutambulira ku mafuta. Abisse ebimu tebimuluma nnyo lwaki bwe baagala okwegaggawaza bokka.
Mukulu njagala tuwulire ki ky'oyogera ku njogera y'omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo yabadde ayogerako eggwanga gw'olowooza ki kye yandiyogeddeko oba generally tubuulire ki ky'olowooza ku njogera y'olunaku olw'eggulo. Tutandike n'erinnya lyo.
Amannya Lukwago Mustafa Rashid. Pulezidenti egyo bye yayogedde tebina kye bituyambamu. Yalemeddwa okwogera ensonga ezinyiga bannayuganda. Abasawo mu malwaliro beekalakaasa teri ddagala. Ogamba otya abantu mbu balye mawogo nga n'olukumi olugula mawogo taluyina. Abantu bali eno bafa ng'afudde lwa nusu bitaano ebigula panado. Malwaliro teri ddagala agenzeyo beekalakaasa. Atuyambe buyambi.
Okay, tukyali wano tukozese ebigambo ebisaamusaamu. Tukyali wano kusitu mukulu ku njogera kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo kwe tuliko. President yayogeddeko eri eggwanga olunaku olw'eggulo. Ki ky'oyogera ku nsonga olowooza waliwo kye yalese ng'alina okyogerako oba tutandike n'erinnya lyo?
Bampita Isaac, ebbeeyi y'ebintu yandisse kubanga ffe abawansi ffe bagula ebintu. Omuntu abadde asuubira okugula ebintu tugeze oba kiro y'ennyama aba takyagiguza bagenda kugula kwota. Ennyama eba ejja kuddiba mu bbuca. Buli muntu omulimu gubaguze kitegeeza Uganda byagaye mbwe yeyongera waggulu naye ekonomi egudde tukkirize tugaye.
Okay, nkyali wano ku street ez'okubayita ababiri njogerako n'abasuubuzi bano bantu baffe bantu ba wansi olunaku olw'eggulo babadde bawuliriza n'okulaba omukulembeze ng'ayogerako eri eggwanga. Bingi bye yayogeddeko naye tubuuza nti ki gwe ky'oyogera mu kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo. Tutandike n'amannya go.
Amanya nze Sali Ibra. Ensonga omukulembeze jjo gye yayogeddeko ensonga eyankutteko ennyo. Muzeeyi yagenze n'atugamba tulyemu muwogo naye kati muwogo nga wa bbeeyi mwana wa muzeeyi muwogo wa buseere ekyo kye kituufu naye muzeeyi
yandyogeddeko ng'omukulembeze.
Muzeeyi byeyayogeddeko byebyo naye emisolo bambi atusaasira akendeeze ku misolo.
Okay, tukyali kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo. Kiki ky'olowooza mu kwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olw'eggulo yabadde ayogerako eri eggwanga? Tutandike n'amannya go.
Amanya gange nze Mugisa Patrick ndi Kidomole supplier number 1 wano kubayita ababiri era ni musajja mukozi nnyo naye obuzibu tusanga mu nsonga ezo eza president zayogerako amafuta gafuusa amafuta emmere nga bwogiraba akatale kaffe kano emmere eva wala mafuta ga bbeeyi ate emmere bw'oseera omuntu enkya tagenda kudda ate nga n'emmere agyagala kati n'olwekyo ne tulowoozaamu Museveni agenda tuyamba kyawo kweyo ensonga eyo.
Ensonga y'amafuta golowooza yandibadde agitegako nnyo essira?
Amafuta go yandibadde agateekako nnyo essira kubanga emmere eva wala ate ewala weeva nga bambi abantu naawe balaba emmere ejja nga nnyingi naye mu bungi bwayo okujja kwayo bambi nga ate ya buseere bwemugamba nti emmere ensonga y'amafuta yandibadde enkulu.
Kukwogerako omukulembeze olunaku olwo olowooza ki kye yandiyogeddeko oba wamuwuliriza?
Batukendeeze ku bintu omusolo gwonna guyitiridde ku bintu kutandikiranga ku mafuta n'embeera y'abantu nga bwe tuyimiridde.
Mukulu lumonde wa mmeka?
Lumonde ono muzeeyi katoka n'okalaba 2,000 ono naye nga yalibadde wa 2. kunyigirizibwa naffe tuba tetulina kyakukola abantu tubanyigiriza olw'amafuta mmere mu kyalo ya bbeeyi amafuta ga bbeeyi kati oba tolina kyakukola oba olina okubaseeramu nawe olabe ng'oyitawo kitegera ndowooza.
Okay, Kale. Chris and Priscilla, these are the vendors, the locals who are doing their daily businesses here. But of course, they're making sense of the presidential nation address yesterday. Some of the things that they expected that the president was supposed to talk about, if you can just listen, the rising fuel prices are saying was really so important and key in his nation address, because they're saying this has largely contributed to whatever raise of the price on every commodity here, saying he should have paid a lot of attention to discuss the fuel issue, among other things that they've discussed or told us here. But for time reasons, I want to come back to in the studios. A very good morning to you and our audience.
Well, thank you so much, Ivan K. there for that contribution. Now we also get to turn to reactions from distinguished gentlemen here. I'll start with Mr. Ambassador Henry Mayega. They have mentioned the fuel crisis that we are facing right now, and in all honesty, the president should have made mention of just even if a tiny wincy solution to the fuel crisis that we have. But from where you sit, what is the next step towards management of the fuel crisis?
Of course, I can understand what the problem is, because, for instance, in the UAE, fuel prices have increased by over 30%. And like the car which I used to use about 400 dirhams to fill a tank. Now it is over 500. It is over 500 something and so on and so forth dirhams to fill it. So I can understand fully that the problem is a big one, and so not only in Uganda but all over the world. In Kenya, it was much worse quite a couple of weeks ago. I don't know whether it has improved, but I doubt whether it has improved. In the US, still the crisis of fuel is there. So this is a global problem, and how do we sort it out? Or how do we cushion our own people from the effects of that price hike in terms of prices and commodity prices and so on and so forth? In the short run, yes, it's going to be a challenge, because I have not seen in a country where taxes have been, for instance, removed from the oil, because it has lots of ramifications for the economy in the long run, moreover. And therefore, I believe that this problem is going to be temporary, and I believe that eventually we'll overcome this problem and make sure that we go ahead as an economy. Thank you so much,
Ambassador. Joel Ssenyonyi, we do have the alternative government. What would have been the recommendations with this economic crisis? Just one recommendation.
Well, we have adumbrated them clearly. We have laid them on table, presented them in Parliament. Many times they're ignored, but at least they're on record. So that's why we are saying it doesn't make sense to paint a picture of there's nothing we can do about this situation. Commodity prices, we have said, look, there are certain taxes that can be lessened, at least for now. In Parliament, the Minister of Trade told us in April that the 10% import duty on this crude oil that we bring in is part of the reason why prices of soap went up, prices of cooking oil, and we said, okay, so then why don't you lessen that for now, so that the shock gets to be dealt with? It did make sense to them. Okay. We introduced digital stamps, electronic stamps, and we said, okay, because government was saying we need to make a lot more money through taxes on commodities like beer, cement, sugar, drinking water, etc., etc. Yeah. But you see, at the time, before the digital stamps were introduced, URA was collecting from those items 627 billion shillings. In fact, 627.54.
All right.
When they introduced that, they paid a company called CISPA. 145 billion was paid to them. How much did they collect? 600 billion. So you're introducing something that is costly, hoping you'll benefit more, but actually that has gone down. Well, finally, on this issue of fuel prices, again, there's things that we can do for purposes of planning. Idi Amin Dada in the 1970s.
Not give us history, Joel, also. No.
It is, well, Mr. Museveni likes to use it. In 30 seconds, let me use it against him.
From you.
Because, see, the fuel reserves we're talking about in Jinja were built by Idi Amin Dada.
Okay, let me first go to Stephen Bide, and then I'll come back to you. Stephen Bide in Natete.
Honorable Joel Ssenyonyi and Ambassador Henry Mayega are speaking about that should concern the local people here in downtown Kampala, and particularly this is Natete. Issues of commodity prices, issues issues of big concern for local consumers, for the families and individuals. That's why I'm here to understand what they make of the recent, yesterday's presidential address, that is the State of the Nation address. Did they listen to the speech? What do they make about this speech that was delivered by President Museveni, and what do they make about the issues that are still of a concern, issues of rising commodity prices, issues of agriculture and the commodity prices? Mukulu ono se wasotya
yendi se wasira sewa
okola mukatale
esewa
obumonde buli bei kikati
esewa iri mtwala 27 15 18 esewa
ndabange kiri waggulu ennyo ekyo
kiri waggulu olw'ensonga nti omukulembeze tatufuddeeko kyovola yagambye tajja kussa mafuta oba twette
wamuwuliriza bulungi eggulo
namuwulirizaako ebimu nakabyebukaye maziga kuba sirina budde bumye bumuwa olw'ensonga nti zakunganya ekimu tafuddeeko yafuddeko bali bakasajja ababba sente y'omusolo abaana basomye wano we bali abasinga ne kasajja ebitabo kasajja yawummula dda
oli minisita gwoyogerako naye njagala ku president bwe yadde ayogera yayogedde ku byobulimi yayogedde ku byamafuta emwanya byogeddeko
omwanya era mweganye yagambye yamuleeta nayagenda okola talina bukugu bwa mwanya alina bukugu bwa ddwaliro naye eddwaliro nesente bazimwa obuwumbi n'obuwumbi talina kyeyatuyamba eddwaliro balireka nga we balireka basindikayo ababaka okunoonyereza ku byeddwaliro bakwata abamu ne bagana okuyingirayo nsonga lwaki naye nga yo omukulembeze w'eggwanga yatutwale nga bataata nti tuli waka yatuzaala atumira olw'ensonga yo byetuliko
kikyagala bakolere ng'abaana
ng'omwana oba ng'omuzzukulu agenze ku bintu by'omusolo bakati amafuta dizero ali mitwalo agenda mu mutwalo gumu tezanza atunda obumonesa yo 26 njagitunda emitwalo 30 kitegeeza omwana aba alina awaka emmere ng'atandika butandisikulya tajja kulya kammonde kubanga kano embanga atunda 2000 kalinga kano ngatunda omutwalo kano gatano omwana aba n'akalya
abantu bajja ne bagula
bajja abagulako naye tebakyagula kusanyusa muntu anoonya 10 sina kubeerawo kubanga olisenga bajja kuba nti akakulya kammonde ate n'alemererwa olwo abaana waali tayinza kugula kammonde ngate omuti gwa sabbuuni gwa bbeeyi agamba kandike akammonde ng'oli sabbuuni ebbafu yalayisa osinga omuti gwa sabbuuni esata yalayisa osinga omuti gwa sabbuuni kale okitegeeza gulaba omuntu omu alemereddwa okulya n'azaala omwana embeera tayinza kusikiriza kulya nga gwe omuntu omu osibirira kikomando ali nakyo kiganya kale kitegeeza akammonde ajja kalya kyapati yali 10 saawa zino yabitaano ate kyali kyapati kafuuka kaveera enya bamutaka nende Ismail
wabanyo muskulu wandu gwa Katende Ismail kati ka wanji mama
amawulire gamwe ngagala nnyo gabakwala ali era siyinza kumala lunaku nga siwuliriza
nze gatubulire president wamuwuliriza bulungi eggulo
namuwuliriza munnange
agamba atya ahagwe wabirabyemu ki
sina kye nalabyemu mbi yayogedde kyamakulu
lwaki
kubanga amadde nsuubira nga agenda kugamba nti amafuta tugasazeeko kubanga amafuta ge gatambuza buli kimu semu
kakati gwe amafuta ago gakosa gatya ennyingi zaayo ne byotunda
anti kati buli aleeta emirimu akugamba nti amafuta ga bbeeyi nandibadde nsala ku bbeeyi naye amafuta twalowoozeza nti pulezidenti agenda kwogera batulalise bukyali netubeera ne ku tivi zaffe Museveni agenda kwogera mubeereewo ne tubeerawo tulabe naye sina kye nafunyemu nga
kiki wadde wagala akolere ddala kiwadde wagala okuwulira nekyotawulidde kiwadde wagala kibe nga kikolebwa mu mbeera eno eriwo kubanga yagenda kudda era wiiki ejja asoma budget
kakati era nze siraba kigenda kungasa lwa nsonga omuntu kasita otugamba nti ng'aggwe taata mu maka n'ogamba nze taata ŋŋambye abaana bakaba enjala bayinza oba okaba enjala ng'olinda taata omanyi taata ye mutwe naye n'akugamba nti siina kyenyinza bakolera
wiiki ejja akomawo akole ki akyasobola okukyusamu
aba asobola asale ku mafuta osanga embeera enaagonjooka naye ffe nga ffe fe tulaba ebintu bimulemye nandibadde addako ebbali abalala ne bakikwatamu
kyakulwawo kyekizibu oba kyakutereza mbeera y'abantu
anti kankubula egyokoma okulwa mu kintu oyonoona ne bwaba ali okola bulungi n'olwawo oyonoona